now. And I would like to give the floor now to Fenneke.
Yeah, I will share my screen because I prepared a PowerPoint presentation. So, can you see the screen?
I can, yes, perfectly, yeah.
Okay, good. So the title of our dialogue today is how to set the agenda for RCR training using the target audience as a compass. And as an example for this we use our Tetrios project in the Universities of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. And well, Susan will tell more about that project. We do this together, not just two of us, but also with our colleague Rob van der Sande, but he couldn't be here today. I will start with an introduction about what are we what are we actually talking about, and how did we what is our approach in setting the agenda. So starting at the beginning, then Susan will introduce the project and show some preliminary results about what our target audience is actually telling us, and some other interesting findings that we found along the way. And then I will continue with the third part on how we then actually started compiling the training in a step-by-step approach. So I said I would start with the beginning, and usually the beginning of a new training or a redesign of an existing training is usually that there is a reason, there's an occasion why it needs to be designed or redesigned. And often you're building on the previous experience, especially when there's already training, then you work from that. In our example, the occasion was that in a previous project with focus groups with senior researchers in the Universities of Applied Sciences, there was a clear need for training because there's no training on research integrity or on responsible conduct of research in the Universities of Applied Sciences yet, and they expressed that need. So then there was a new project, the Tetrios project, aiming to fill that gap. And I was at that point not yet working in the University of Applied Sciences, but since I had a lot of experience with the development of trainings in the Dutch universities, they asked me if I would join this project. And well, I very much liked that idea to broaden my horizon, but I also felt like I want to know, like, what's the difference then? Because the Universities of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, there's quite a difference between universities and Universities of Applied Sciences. So I wanted to know what is that difference then, and what does that mean for doing research, and for, well, what the training should include. So the starting point of this training design was actually there. While often, as I said, you already have a training and you want to redesign it or improve it, and then you start with what was good and you work from there. And often the advice is, don't reinvent the same wheel, make use of what is already there. But what I felt like, I didn't want these existing training in the Dutch universities deciding what we were going to teach in the Universities of Applied Sciences. So the previous designs of other trainings, they will come in later in another step. So not in the beginning, not in the first step. So then, what is the first step here? For that, I have like two central questions in mind. The first is, what do we want to teach them? Some knowledge, some skills, maybe if we can work on attitude. And once you know what we actually want to teach them, then the next question is, how can we best do that? And that also involves multiple perspectives. What is the best for the learning objectives? But also, what is the best for the trainees that you have in mind? And what is the best for the trainers? Because it should also be feasible for them or work for them what they are going to train. So those are the central questions in the design process of this training. And so I said, let's start at the beginning and go back even further. Because if you look at this first central question, what do we want to teach them? To answer that question, we need to get to know the target audience. And especially for me, since I was new in the University of Applied Sciences, I felt like I really should start here and take time for this. So we decided to do interviews, and that is what Susan will tell about.
Yeah, I'm looking at Julia. I knew that you would ask a question. Julia, go for it.
Yeah. So thank you for this wonderful talk. It was really interesting for me to listen because I'm also at the University of Applied Sciences. So my question is, as you said, so you have you got the feeling that you have to raise the awareness of research integrity and the scope of it because it's not a topic they're used to talk about. So I didn't do any interviews at my institution, but I would guess the same here. Can you explain why this is so in the Netherlands, in a sense of what tasks and aims do the University of Applied Sciences have in the Netherlands? Are there institutions only of education, or do they also have the task to research in specific fields?
Yeah, yes, they have to do education and also doing research, but it's developing research at University of Applied Sciences. So I think that's a reason why they are now getting to know also about the theme research integrity. We have to be more aware of it, but I don't know exactly what the reason is. Fenneke, do you have an idea?
I don't know how things evolved in the past, but it is really something that is coming more and more part of the task of the University of Applied Sciences to also do research, and with a strong focus on doing that in practice and together with with society and with companies, etc. So that there are lots of challenges arise, and since this is it never was their main focus and now becomes more important, all these challenges also more are surfacing now, and also 2.5 years ago we got a new national code of conduct for research integrity, and it was the first time that also the Universities of Applied Sciences joined in that code of conduct. And part of the code of conduct, there's a separate chapter in the code about institutional duties of care, and that also includes the duty to train. So there's also an extra incentive why this is now more and more important, and there's more attention for it. And so the Universities of Applied Sciences are also now developing ethical review boards, etc. That they didn't have that many of that before. So it's really something in development.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have also a question. So you said, first of all, thank you very much. Very, very interesting. And I was looking at the quotes, and normally you have, like, if it's man or woman, right? Mr. SR, and then and I could only see men. So in the 12 people that you interviewed, did you also have women that
I will explain it. Maybe that's not the right English translation, but I mentioned a senior researcher and a junior researcher, but we the most were men, I think, but there were also women.
Okay, that would lead me, thank you, to my second question, because at the moment I'm trying to enter this amazing world of research integrity and equality. And did you also include, or did any one of your interview partners mention the fact that also intersectionality or the fact that we should maybe question our way of doing research, that we not always focus on, I don't want to say it, but white people, but also have other races in mind, or whatever, other topics. Was this mentioned? Was this a topic?
I remember one interview, Fenneke, and just out of my head, there was a researcher who told us, for example, during the training, invite a patient or a participant to tell about how it is to how do you say it in English? To be involved in a research. But she told us more about it, but I can't remember it.
Yeah, and there was also someone who mentioned that in her research, where there were a lot of men, that she felt that influenced the way in which she perceived what the results were. So, and she struggled with it, and she wanted to talk about that with her supervisor, and the supervisor didn't really understand that. So I think that is one of these examples. But I have to say that this topic comes up more in the discussions that I have in the university than in the University of Applied Sciences. But I think that has to do with the fact that it's so new. So they are just discovering the scope of it. And I think that they do encounter such issues, but don't link it with that it's part of research integrity. Because, well, as Susan told also in the beginning, there were also people who mentioned at the end of the interview that they learned so much by being part of the interview. So I think it's really, they're just getting to know the field.
Understood. Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for this. And sorry, this is now my Spanish background, because SR is señor. So I don't know why I connected it with Mr. Sorry for this.
No.
Yeah. Are there any more questions to Susan about, or in Fenneke, about the outcome clarifying questions? Because if not, I would have one more question. You were speak twice referring to ethical decision making. So in path integrity, we have been, and I'm still quite struggling a lot about the difference between research integrity and research ethics, which we know in theory it's maybe more a theoretical discussion than a discussion in practice. But what were they referring to when you write about ethical decision making?
Yeah, we are also a little bit discussing about the topic. How do we want to have it, want to talk and make a training program about research integrity and not about ethics? So we're also a little bit discussing how do we do that in practice to keep the line sharp.
And I think the focus will be more on the practical aspects of it. So on having a dialogue, etc., as part of, or as a means of getting to an ethical decision, and not so much on the theory behind it. That's probably what the outcome will be in the training.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Any more thoughts, ideas? If not, maybe after Fenneke's part, you might have more questions. So Fenneke, would you like to continue then?
Yes, I will share my screen again. So yeah, the third part, and I promised to tell about how we compiled the training in a step-by-step approach. So these are the steps from mapping the needs, what Susan just told about, then prioritizing, selecting, combining the objectives and the themes, then a demarcation, then completing the program, so filling in how to do what, and then the development of materials and of course a pilot in the end. We are now in the stage of step 4. So I can show you what we did in step 1 and 2. Well, we mapped the needs, we looked at the conditions, and well, I also added here restrictions, because of course sometimes the conditions are a restriction, but it's important during such a process to use restrictions not as a leading aspect, but maybe more in the sense of the demarcation of it, so, or as fine-tuning it, but we try to not let ourselves be restricted from the beginning. So, and then the second step was the prioritization, and what we did here is we didn't only look at the results of the interviews, but we also had an advisory group meeting where we presented the preliminary results and discussed it with them. So what does it mean? How do we feel about that? For example, topics that we felt were lacking, that we, from our own expertise and our own experience, could add topics or leave them out, as we felt that, for example, the topic of methodology should not be in our training, although the interviewees talked about it a lot, but that we felt like that is a different kind of training, so that should be covered by a different training program. So to show the how we did that, combining in step 2, so we first made this prioritization, so what should be in it, or do we really want to have in it, and then how can we combine some of the priorities also with the topics, to see what we can actually have in it. And then we made this scheme. It's in Dutch, so don't worry if you cannot read it. It's just to show the structure. So on the left we have the knowledge and some topics that should be part of the knowledge, and the attitude and skills and the topics within that. And then in the columns we have the learning objectives, 1 to 5 for the first part of the training and 1 to 4 for the second part, because when we were prioritizing, we felt there are a lot of things that are all so important, but that should not all fit into one course. So we actually decided we will start with a basic training program, and then we have a more in-depth training program that people can then do next, and that is more focused on teams, and the basic training is more for the individuals. I will get back to this later. So in total we had 9 objectives, and per objective in this table you see which sub-objective of the of that learning objective covers which topic. And in this way, by doing it in this way, you can easily see whether a column or a row remains empty, and then you know there's something that we that we have to do something about, or maybe we can conclude then that is not one of the priorities. And additionally to this, we used different colors for the different learning objectives to indicate their cognitive level. So you see for the basic training, it starts with the color orange, and the team training starts already further on in the color spectrum, so that has a higher level and continues until blue. And that's what you see here. So the basic level is remembering, that's in red, then understanding, and then all the way up to the creating part, which is then part in the training for teams. So on the left hand side here you see the basic training for the individual trainers, where we cover the mostly the first 4 and a little bit of the 5th cognitive level, covering awareness, understanding, responsibility, reflection, and having open conversations about research integrity. And then the next level training that we aim for teams, that starts already at the level of applying, all the way up to creating. And that creating, that is the part taking action. So for this group, also reflection is on the schedule. We talk about stewardship. So how can you be an advocate for research integrity? And not only about open conversations, but really about dialogues and different techniques for that, and taking action. So they end with making a plan of action together in the team, how they are going to promote research integrity. So then, well, when we had that idea, like, okay, this is what it should be about. This is what should be in one training. This is what should be in the other training. We want to see, okay, how can we then do that? So we have the learning objectives on one hand, and the themes or the topics on the other hand. The learning objectives lead to specific training methods, and the topics lead to case history and examples that we want to use, and those we can use in those training methods. And with the training methods, we choose them specifically to practice what in the end you want to see. So if you have in mind with your objectives what kind of behavior you would like to see in your trainees after the training, then we should practice that specific behavior with the training method. So for example, we practice with different types of dialogues. So in this, what we kept in mind, there's the central question again: how can we best do that? How can we best do that for the learning objectives, for the trainees and for the trainers? Well, as I promised in the beginning, there's a slide from the first part of this presentation. I promised that the previous design would come in later. So here it is. These training methods and this case history and examples come from different projects that are already there. Well, so of course, Path to Integrity, you know it, and also some other of these larger European projects. They developed training materials, and we also use something that I'm using in my other my other job in the university's medical center in Amsterdam. So we actually looked at all these different available teaching methods, and picked from that what fits well with our program, and then we could almost already fill the whole program. And then there are only just small things that we feel like, okay, there we should develop something ourselves. So for example, a specific case history based on the stories that they told in the interviews, or specific topics that they addressed that are more specific to the universities of applied sciences. But then it's like a small effort to make a new training program if you can make use of all this, what is already there. So that is where we are now. We are now finalizing this design, and then in the next 3 months we will be making that all these materials, write the syllabus, etc., and have a pilot. So that is the step-by-step approach and how we implemented that. And I think we have some time left now for some questions, but if you come up with a question after today, then you can always email me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Fenneke and Susan. Are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question concerning the first part. As you mentioned that there is a national code of conduct in Netherlands, yes, and that somehow you collected those different opinions from the researchers, and some of them had different opinions. Did something change since then? Do your universities now have, for example, just mandatory courses on research integrity?
Well, in the universities of applied sciences, they don't have training at all, so also not mandatory. But in universities and university medical centers, they have trainings already for a longer time. And for example, for PhD students, it's sometimes mandatory, but it depends on the institution. That's not a national policy, but it's what the institution decides.
Yes, because I think this is a very crucial point, if it's mandatory or not within the academic education, and how intensive are those courses, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's quite a diversity there.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Julia, your micro. Yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, so first, thank you, Fenneke, for this really wonderful talk. My question goes to your systematic. So you planned your course by using the Bloom taxonomy. And you said one course is for the 4 levels from up to remembering and applying and so on and so on. And the other course is for the experienced one is going up until the level of creation. Did you have any difficulty when you tried to apply this taxonomy of Bloom to the field of research integrity? Because I did it once too. And I'm honest, sometimes I was really struggling. I was like, okay, so because research integrity is so fluid in a sense of, okay, which topic do we use? Is it more process and so on and so on? So that sometimes I had the feeling that it switched and I couldn't grab it. What is now exactly the level of the Bloom taxonomy, which I am
Yeah, we had some discussions about how to formulate the learning objectives. And well, they are in Dutch, so that's why I didn't present them. But we really looked at, okay, what kind of verbs are we using? And does that reflect what we actually want? So we also spoke about, let's say, in 6 months' time, after participating, what kind of behavior do you want to see? And by imagining that, then you kind of find like what is it exactly that we're looking for, and that helped in formulating this and choosing the right verbs. And then those verbs kind of tell you in which level of the Bloom taxonomy you are. But I have to be honest, I did a similar thing a couple of years ago in a university medical center in Amsterdam. Not as extensive as we are doing now, but in small. And at that time, there were less materials available, or well, there was already a wealth of teaching materials, but they had a more narrow focus. So the focus of what was available was much more on the lower cognitive levels. And in recent years, materials came available that are much more about dialogues, etc., and also a more positive approach to it. So it's what the traditional materials were more on about the big sins like falsification and fabrication and plagiarism, and what you are not allowed to do. So it was more negative in that sense. And nowadays there's more focus on the gray area, because that is where we can actually make a change. And that is what also happens way more. So on an aggregate level, the gray area is much more important in that sense to address, and also makes it more tangible for everybody, because with the big sins, people say, yeah, we are not doing that, we know that. So to really speak to someone, to make research integrity also more of an intrinsic thing, you have to speak to them, to their own daily practice. And in last years, there are more and more materials focusing on that. So actually now it's easier to make a training with this approach than a couple of years ago.
And if I may add something, like Fenneke said, the focus is on behavior. And what makes it difficult for me to make those learning objectives, we don't have an exam or a report they have to write. So it's something you have to develop. So that's why, like Fenneke said, we have to focus on what kind of behavior we would like them to show. Did you recognize it, Julia, the difficulties with formulating the objectives?
Yeah, so I am completely with you, and so to concentrate on the verbs, yeah, that's the way I would go too. Still, for me, it's difficult. If we take the example of conducting a dialogue on responsible research conduct, or conducting a dialogue with rational arguments, yeah, you can give whatever you want. So this can be done on the level of applying. So I apply the dialogue in different contexts. It can be done on the creative level in the sense of, oh, I never heard this dialogue before, or this rational arguments before. So it always, from my point of view, it always comes down to, okay, which perspective do I have from the beginning? And this is mainly described with the overarching aim of the program, which you described at the beginning. So I think it's a good thing to include actually the trainees, to ask them, okay, what do you want? Because then you can specify it with the Bloom's taxonomy. It's really difficult if you don't have this overall aim, because then the learning objectives can jump around actually in each direction. There is no so in other fields of education, there already is an established standardization. So then you can refer there. But because research integrity is not as standardized, but you're right, Fenneke, it's getting more and more standardized in the sense that we do have now the material and we can refer to each other. And I do think, yes, that's actually the way we have to go. And I didn't want to say, please understand me right. I think it's the best way to go with this taxonomy. But I just wanted to say it's still a little bit difficult to use it because it's not, it's a bit ambiguous, the outcome.
Yes, it's definitely not infallible. You still have to do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but are you going to translate the learning objectives in the future? Not now, but in the future, so that we can read them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we are now doing this in Dutch, and the first training, the pilot, will probably be in Dutch because most of the researchers in the universities of applied sciences are Dutch, which is different in universities. There we do everything in English. But we are planning to write the paper for the Facets journal, so we have to translate it soon.
Perfect.
So yeah, we will be doing that.
Nice. Thank you.